Hi, everyone. My name is Michael King. It's March 25th, 2025, and I'm your host for another interview here on Artful Minds, where I aim to dig into the minds of other artists, uncovering creativity, passion, and process. Our inspirational discussion today is with Julie Davis. Julie is a Texas-born artist. She's known for her expressive oil paintings that capture the beauty of the natural world. She translates her impressions of a place into artwork through careful observation, sketching, and studies, whether creating plein air pieces on location or using them as the foundation for her larger studio paintings. Since 2007, Julie has honed her craft under the guidance of master painters, earning recognition from prestigious groups like the Oil Painters of America and the American Impressionist Society. And her award-winning work is featured in galleries across Texas, Colorado, and Oregon. Welcome, Julie. Thank you very much for doing this interview.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And before I forget, you can find Julie on the interwebs at juliedavisstudio.com. And her handle on Instagram is Julie Davis Studio. And I'm going to share my screen, Julie. And if you can, while I'm showing some photographs of your artwork, just talk about how all this started for you.
Absolutely. Well, I didn't come to painting until around, like you said, 2007 or so. I have a background I have a law degree and a teaching certificate. Didn't come from a family that was, the idea of being an artist wasn't really an idea in my family. It was, my dad was a physician. A lot of my siblings kind of went either in that direction or some professional direction. And I always loved to draw as a kid. We talked about that earlier. It's something a lot of artists say, but I never thought that was an option. So I kind of went through life and we had kids, and I think they were around middle schoolish age when I went to an art event in Austin and happened to win a raffle, and I got to choose a painting as part of this raffle before anyone else got to choose. And the painting I chose was a landscape by an artist named Laurel Daniel, whose name I think I just saw pop up. So I think she's watching this right now. But it was a beautiful landscape, and I met her there. I didn't paint at the time, but turns out she taught oil painting at a local art school. And so I thought, I want to try that. I've always been curious, and maybe I can do it. So, and thinking just, as a hobby, she was a terrific mentor to me and became a dear friend, and really encouraged me in that direction. So I studied with her for several years and then started taking workshops from others around the country, and learned that Laurel had given me an incredible background and base knowledge. And I just kind of took it from there and have thoroughly enjoyed it every step of the way.
Thank you so much. I got lost in my windows. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's a very concise that tracks with everything I read about you. There's a lot of good information about you out there. So thank you for doing previous interviews and whatnot.
Lovely.
Now, one of the things I don't know if I heard that you mentioned, you also used to do black and white photography. And I know another artist who started off doing photography, black and white, and her composition skills are through the chart. So how do you find that your early endeavor with the black and white photography has helped your painting / compositional skills when you're painting?
Well, I think it teaches you a lot about light and composition. I mean, there's certainly something to framing a subject and trying to figure out what's the most interesting way to do it. That was a huge hobby for me. I kind of thought about going into it more professionally when my children were young, but my grandfather also did a lot of black and white photography, developed their own film and that kind of thing. So it was kind of just a real interest thread through my family. But I didn't take it any further than just being a hobby, but I learned a ton in the process. And I think it informs what I do today.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's about the light. Like I've never really gotten into photography. I find it extremely difficult. But how would you go about, say, thinking about or using the idea of photography to start the idea of a painting, thinking of it as light?
Well, light, and I think of it as in black and white terms is what I mean. Like almost like a Notan.
Okay.
In that regard, as far as shape and black and white. And when you have a lot of contrasts, an area, subject matter, interesting shapes, I just kind of I process it that way when I look outside now. I think just originally taking black and white photos.
That's interesting. So you probably had a a good head start on a lot of us in terms of creating interesting paintings instead of just painting the photo, which we all start doing, right?
Yeah, we do. We try. We want to copy what's there.
Always 100%, eh? And not
Mhm.
knowing it's wrong. Should I say that? Wrong?
Oh yeah. No, photos are absolutely. I mean, yeah, photos are wrong as far as color goes. That's why,
Yeah,
black and white is so helpful. Color, not as much. They'll give you information, but not always accurate information. So you kind of keep an eye on that. They're just there for, recording the absolute, details or shapes or something like that. And then they kind of go to the side, and sketches and plein air sketches and drawings and notes take over.
absolutely. 100% agree to that. But okay, so when you're first introduced to the concept of the Notan, were you just thinking, well, this is just drawing photography? And what is it easier for you to get into Notans if you
I
do them?
I don't do them every time, but I do them, and I find it quite fun. I find I'm really drawn to shape over color in any painting I'm doing. And so a no-tan is it's sort of like just a really fun design exercise for me. And I think it's really valuable.
See, that brought up an interesting question for me in terms of you focusing on shapes. It revolves around how your paintings are very tonalist in nature. And so would you contribute your tonalism to thinking more of shape and design, I guess, than objects and things?
I think I'm just really interested I mean, that's my motivator. Like when I go outside and I'm looking for a subject, I am definitely drawn to, patterns of light and dark and interesting shapes above color. And there may be certainly it's exciting when there's maybe a distant, pop of color that's unique. That always helps. But color for me has always been a bit secondary. And I'm taking Skip Whitcomb's color course right now, actually. So that is my one area of resistance, and I need to understand it better and become a more sophisticated, have a more sophisticated understanding of color than I have, and just out of a lack of desire and interest in it. But now I'm super excited about it. I don't think that's going to turn me into a colorist, but it is going to enhance my ability to understand grays and to get more harmony in my paintings and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, I'm so jealous of you taking that course. And color, really, when you think about it, isn't the stuff that comes out of the tube. It is what, just like you said, the colorful grays and creating a better harmony and stuff like that. And through Skip, well, I remember through my interview, it was just fascinating when you started to talk. So I can't imagine a year-long course with him. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, and it's something that I have to go back and listen and watch again and again. I'm taking it slowly because I really want to absorb it all.
Oh, for well, good luck.
Thank you.
Now, I listened to quite a few of your other interviews and read a few things about what you said. And one of the things you mentioned was blah, 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 painting trees like broccoli, which I think a lot of people do. But what you did, you set up for a year-long quest just to
Mhm.
paint trees. And I find that fascinating because you didn't go to books and say how do I paint a fir tree? How do I paint a pine tree? How do I paint an aspen? You just went and painted. And can you talk about that process and how it helped you compared to just reading?
Sure. I mean, that was when I was in Laurel's classes back in when I was very, very beginner landscape painter. And I was thoroughly overwhelmed with the landscape, as we all are when we begin. It's complete chaos. It's hard to make sense of anything. And I think I just sat down one day and outside and I was just so frustrated. I cannot figure out how to do any of this. And I knew that, trees were obviously something, if you're going to be a good landscape artist, you need to be able to paint trees well. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to take every time I come out in one of these classes, I'm not going to worry about a composition. I'm not going to worry about what I'm painting that day. I'm going to find a tree or a bush, some version of a tree, and I'm going to focus on that. And it took a while, but I would just do little studies. I didn't really try to compose anything. And I was blogging at the time; that was a thing, and I was posting them. And it started to, I think, resonate with some people, and I really began to lean into it after a while. it occurred to me that I love doing this. At one point, you start to have little aha moments along the way, and you learn this and you learn that, and you kind of take that and go, oh, finally, I've learned to make this type of brushstroke that can be really helpful when painting trees, or a color, or you just have revelations when you deeply study a subject, or some aspect of painting, and you deep dive into it. And so, along with that, I was reading John Carlson and his chapter on trees and all that good stuff. I mean, I was absolutely studying, but painting outside, every time I went out for an entire year, I painted only a tree. And I learned a ton, and it kind of evolved from there. And I just began to absolutely love the figures of the landscape. They're all individual, and there's a beauty in them, and it's never ending.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love the idea of, and you got onto it early, is that every time you go out, you don't have to make a painting, and you don't have to have that frustration of finishing. You just need to paint that tree. You don't even need to paint anything around it or a
Right.
rock, choose anything. But the idea is you paint, paint, and paint, and then it'll all just soak in and you got the experience. And that is really how you improve, right? Not just trying to
Absolutely.
finish paintings. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the value of beginnings of a painting can never be overestimated, is what Henry said. And I think I took that to heart too, in that starting a painting is as valuable as finishing. And if you fail on an outing or in the studio, it's still valuable because you learned to begin it. You learned something by beginning it. And so, I've always kind of taken that to heart, as far as being outside and painting on plein air is so challenging. And it's not necessary to make a finished piece every time, but it sure is fun to gather information. And if you want to make a finished piece, that's great. And sometimes we need to, but it's also absolutely, just fun being out there and starting and getting ideas and gathering color notes and that kind of thing. And studying, how clouds are formed and what they look like and their color. And it's just always an adventure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hope everyone takes that to heart. Now, continuing with the theme of trees, I want to just share my screen here. And for me, you have quite a bit of delicacy in your trees. And I just want you to talk about possibly how you achieve that. I'm guessing it's a combination of, lack of better words, positive and negative painting and these thin spots in between. But no matter all these trees that I show, they all have a sense of delicacy to them. So if you
That's
could
funny.
talk about that, it'd be fantastic.
The title of that painting is A Delicate Dance.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. I think I'm probably more methodical with making shape within my tree, and than most people would expect. I don't know. I really think about where all those, that accent foliage on the outside of a tree, where all that is placed. I'm very careful about it. I try not to overdo it or underdo it, or I'm very strategic about where I'm trying to get the eye to go when I use that. So I guess part of the delicacy is being very methodical and thoughtful about that. And yeah, I don't know other than that.
I guess it's a deliberate
I
thought
would
process
love
you
for
go
you
for.
to tell me, or someone else to tell me.
Well, we can probably make some ideas up, but whether or not it follows your logic is another thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I just found them really amazing because I can see an interplay of positive and negative. And
Mhm.
then, it's to me, they look very conscious, and you just kind of reiterated that. They're just
It
not
is very, yeah.
haphazard trees. They're looking and observing and placing and taking away, putting in kind of
Exactly. It's a
process,
whole
right?
building up and pulling back. And, half the time they actually grow on you, and you kind of got to chisel them away, or,
Yeah.
rein them in and then build it back up. It is a delicate dance. It's a back and forth for sure between the sky and the tree and all that. And negative space is just as important as, the actual subject and tree itself.
Yeah, it's a great way to think, I find. One thing I just want to share with you, and I want to say thank you for posting this particular painting you painted. way back when. I found it on Instagram when I was needing inspiration for one of my paintings for the foreground.
Oh, good.
And I selfishly stole this idea where there's rips through the landscape with this little bit of edge here. Of course, colors and stuff were changed and stuff and whatnot.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
But
yeah.
without that, I would not have been able to finish this painting. So I just want to mention to everybody that Instagram is such an amazing app in a sense beyond the algorithm that annoys all us artists. It's fantastic for just inspiration and following people just so you can find things that can help
Yeah.
you with your paintings. Now, that said, have you ever used other people's artworks for inspiring your own or finishing your own?
Well, I mean, don't we all? Isn't that what
Yeah,
you know? I mean, still like an artist, it's absolutely, we're all influenced by everybody else that has come before us. So I think that's for sure something that we all do. And I've been heavily influenced first off by Laurel, but Scott Christensen's been a huge influence on my work, and Jill Carver has been a big influence as well in a different way. But yeah, I probably learned that. I'll call it learn um, from Scott, like the way he handles his foregrounds. And then I think, is it Carlson probably that says you've got to consolidate shapes in your foreground. You can't just have chaos reign. Consolidate, take what's there and then direct it. He said it in one sentence, but that's the same concept is, look at the grasses, get the nuance in there and see what you can do with that. Use it as
yeah.
a jumping off point.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned Scott because when I was looking through your webpage, when you have all your thumbnails up, and I thought to myself, oh, there's a lot of color here that looks influenced by Scott Christensen, but I didn't want to say anything. But yeah,
Yeah,
obviously, right?
no, absolutely. I mean, like he was one of the biggest influences. I think I took his 10-day workshop back in like 2010 or 11 and really just came away mind blown at that point. And he's continued to be a friend and a really big influence on my work.
That's fantastic. And then there's Jill Carver too. And
Mhm.
she's a fantastic interview, amazing painter for sure. And one of the things listening to some of your past conversations is you started to implement a process when you go out for quick color studies on location. Instead of just using panel over panel, you take a larger panel, you subdivide it into four, and you'll just start working on four. Now, is it always of the same scene, or do you kind of
No,
paint one, look 45 degrees, and paint another kind of idea?
most often it's that.
Oh, okay,
I'll paint one, 30 minutes or so, and then hopefully turn my easel a little bit and paint something else, and then turn my easel a little bit and paint. Usually, I'll get 3 out of one scene, maybe 4. It's a great way to spend a day outside and get a whole lot more information, or morning outside and get a whole lot more information than if you just came home with one finished painting, right?
for
And
sure.
back when I took a workshop from her, the one I took, it was probably, geez, almost a decade ago now that I learned that. She was teaching us to do that at that point. And it fit with my lifestyle because my kids were still at home and I didn't have a ton of time to go out and be plein air painting days on end. So going out and being able to come back with basically the idea for 4 paintings perhaps was really, really valuable to me. And then I realized, why am I trying to finish a painting outside? I mean, I get so much more information when I do this, and then I can come back and be very thoughtful about the composition and the design and the color harmony and all that when I come back into the studio. I'll still finish a painting outside occasionally, but I have so much more fun doing it for on a board. And then I can come back too, and I have that board and they're not, it's not like I have 4 different tiny studies that I have to keep up with. And if I want to remember that day, I have to go find all 4 of them. This way I can grab one panel and I can see that day. I can see what that morning, the color of it generally, what it looked like. I can see it sets a tone that just one study wouldn't do. You just have a window into a morning or an afternoon or time of day that gives you a whole different color sense than just one piece would,
Yeah, for
I think.
sure. For sure, for sure. And here's a difficult question for you though, but what exactly do you get out of just doing 4 or 5 color studies in that morning? Like what does it provide you over taking a photo, for example, or doing sketches?
Well, I know what that morning felt like deeply, as you do when you do any plein air painting, right? And I come back in the studio with so much information. I mean, potentially 4 different compositions. Every plein air study isn't necessarily a winner. So maybe one of the 4 is good, but like I learned something from every single one of them.
Yeah. And then when you look at them, even a year after, do you still
Mhm.
remember being out there and remember the
Yeah,
scene and
you
stuff like
know,
that? Yeah.
of course. Yeah, and the weather and yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, viscerally.
Yeah. And that's a huge benefit over anything else, instead of just remembering being frustrated about not finishing it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or just doing a bad, the wheels came off or whatever. You just, yeah, your expectations are different. The other thing is that you're not in your head about, oh, I need to sell this piece, or want this to be really good. And your expectation is different. Your expectation is information gathering. And that is a whole different animal than creating a painting that I want to be proud of or
Yeah.
sell something.
Exactly.
It's got a lot of uses.
That's great. Good advice. I think everyone should take it to heart. I think I'm going to have to try it at least once. Now, since you brought up sales, I just want to ask the question about when you got into your first gallery, how did that come about? And then how did that change you as an artist?
I was very excited. It was probably 2008. It was pretty quick after I started painting. And the guy messaged me on Instagram. He owned a gallery in Sedona, and then that's how it came about. And so I had some conversations, and I checked on the artists that were in the gallery, and I think Jill was showing there, and some others that I knew. And so I went for it. The gallery ended up closing in the 2009, 2008 kind of bust. So it didn't last long, but that was my first.
I guess you got out of it that you had the chops for it, eh?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. Huge operation.
And did it change the way you looked at your artwork and created after that?
I don't know. I don't, I maybe I was more nervous about it or something. I don't remember that being a thing. I mean, I
Okay.
don't think it changed in that I was working toward a certain subject matter or vibe or anything like that. I just kept doing what I was doing.
Speaking about doing what you're doing, I want to bring up you have this posted on your in your website. It's when you did a 2 month excursion into New York and you weren't really an urban painter, but you decided eventually on happenstance to paint the water towers of New York. And so I'm just going to bring up that PDF. And if you can just talk about that experience, it'd be amazing. I encourage everybody to read this PDF. It's got an article written by Outdoor Painter. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, that was in 2019. We were up in New York for a couple of months, and I was knew I wanted to paint there, and I did not know how I was going to make it work because I really didn't want to be down on the street painting urban scenes and around a ton of people with people asking me questions all the time. And so I realized the building we were staying in, I could get to the rooftop. And when I went up there, I looked around, and of course, I'd been painting old structures, barns. I'm thoroughly used to that being from Texas and West Texas. And I look out and there's all these water towers, just endless numbers of water towers. I mean, you can look one direction, there'd be like 7 or 9 or 10 of them just straight in your line of view. And the best part was nobody ever came to that rooftop. So it was perfect for me in that way. And depending on the time of day, I just turned my view just a little bit. The light changed, the weather would change, the time of day, the direction of the sun, everything changed. And I mean, it was endless. There are so many different ways. And it was a totally new subject matter in that there were buildings all around. So I didn't have any foregrounds per se. I had to learn to paint buildings to some extent. And it was a lot of fun. I really had a blast, and I learned something about water towers.
Sounds like you couldn't keep up to what you were seeing. You're just so excited and painting one thing and another, then another, then another.
Yeah, I mean, it was constant. It was terrific. And it was like they were just all brought to me. I couldn't have asked for a better setup. And, it was a totally different palette than I was used to painting with, in that there were a lot of, like pastel pinks, lavenders, grays, just endless variety of those. So that was really interesting. And then just different subject matter. It just really taught me to be open-minded and, try new things and change your palette once in a while. And, just depending on where you are,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. If you want to
different
grow,
places require different things.
Yeah, for sure. That's fantastic. So it's been about 30 minutes. So if you have any questions, throw them in chat. Some people are kind enough to do so already. One of the questions is interesting, and which she says, "What were your challenges during the snow series you've been doing this winter?"
Cold.
Bundling up,
And
right?
being from Texas, the temperature was a definite challenge. Yeah. I mean, again, the New York trip was informative, right? There's a whole different palette. So lovely lavenders, violets, blues, pinks that I'm not used to painting ever. Everything changed. I'm used to painting that landscape up in Jackson. I've done it for the past 5 years or so during the summer and fall and early, like end of fall, I guess. So I get the green palette and the autumn palette and starting into the gray winter palette, but I've never had the snow that totally changes composition. Scenes I've painted before are completely different, just absolutely different. So that was exciting. I wouldn't say that part was a challenge. It was a really fun challenge to just see everything in a new way.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting if it influences you, well, once the snow is gone in that same area, thinking differently,
Yeah,
right?
I
Yeah.
know. I mean, that's what I love about Four Seasons. I mean, for a landscape artist, it's important.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I can imagine living in the tropics trying to do landscape painting year round.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another question she had is, you have such beautiful mark making. Do you have any exercises that you recommend for getting into different marks?
Exercises. I can't say that I do. I've never thought about it like that before. But I mean, I have taught in my trees course, as far as, people will ask about winter trees or trees without a lot of foliage. And that's a really good way to think, I mean, those are all delicate, right? So you can, just I take just a panel that you don't care about or something, or practice on paper with gouache or something, but take a brush and just make marks and try to limit the number of marks you're making into a very, in a very strategic way. I think try working on trunks and skinny trunks and branches and just making the marks and being delicate with them, sort of lifting as you go, and following the taper of a tree, the natural taper of a branch kind of thing. That would probably be the best way I think about it, being an exercise to practice being
Yeah,
delicate with trees.
good advice. And on the topic of mark making, though, do you have anything in your shot box or on your palette at home that's unique and you use for mark making, or are you strictly a brush painter?
I'm pretty much a brush painter. I mean, I have a squeegee that, comes in handy when you're needing to do a ton of aspen trees or something in a certain small area or whatever, but that's dangerous because it's super straight. You need to modify that even once you've laid in some spots. I have a brush that is by Dynasty. That's a really inexpensive brush. It's like a 24 size, but I think it's probably for watercolor. I don't even know. I picked it up in New York when we were there and I needed another brush. And it's a really delicate brush. So, I put that on my materials list of my class because I find myself using that a lot when I'm doing my trees, especially because I can use a corner of it to lay in some foliage, and then I can use the broadside to do the same with a larger area of foliage or something like that. Those are maybe my two. Nothing else exciting. Actually, a Q-tip. That is a really dangerous tool, but if you're trying to do some sky holes and you need to get, it's the same
Hmm.
as one of those little rubber clay sculpture tools. I forget what it's called, but if you dip it in a little Gamsol Q-tip, and then you can kind of wipe away a hole or an area that you need to. The danger with a Q-tip is that you'll end up with a whole bunch of very symmetrical circles all over the tree, which is really not what you want. So be careful.
That's interesting, though. I can see a Q-tip being a lot more useful than one of those silicone sculpture tools,
Yeah.
because those sculpture tools, they pretty much take it clean to the
They take
canvas,
it
right?
all off and
Yeah,
they're very angular. So, but Q-tips have their own, you know,
yeah. So can we
issues.
say
Length.
Julie's delicacy is because of Q-tips?
No, I
No.
don't use them enough. I don't use them. And actually, another tool. Now that you're asking me this, Charlie Hunter introduced me to what are they called? The little dental picks,
Oh
basically.
yeah, that's
He
right. That's
uses
right.
those a lot, and those are fun for dentist sticks, maybe. They come in a little package and you just break one off. They're almost like a little toothpick, but they have a broad side and they have a pointy side. And those are kind of cool for doing branches, in a certain situation or pulling away paint. But I don't really make use of those very often. I am mostly using the brush.
Gotcha. So now we're going to have a run on Q-tips and Dynastics, I guess.
Dentist
Sticks, yeah,
and dentine brushes.
yeah. One of the questions was, what advice do you have on choosing subject matter? It seems like there's endless variety, but how do you hone into kind of exactly what you want to paint?
Well, a lot of it depends on where you are, right? I mean, I guess I'm thinking of when I go out and paint in Jackson or here or something, I know what I want to paint. I generally know what I'm looking for, and then I'm looking for really fun shapes and strong patterns of light and dark. And it doesn't necessarily need to involve a tree. It can be, building, or it can be, whatever. The landscape generally involves some sort of tree, but it doesn't have to be the main subject. I think you just lean into what you're interested in. And if you can find a situation where something's got a good foreground, middle ground, background, some good strong light and dark patterns, and maybe some color that interests you or some great shapes, go for it.
Yeah, this is going to be a fascinating conversation because we can get into a lot, but when you're looking for something or something springs out of the blue when you're looking at it, is it the idea of like weight or mass of objects compared to others, or do you start taking values, or do you rely on kind of the quintessential compositional elements like S's and L's and T's and stuff like that?
No, I don't necessarily think like that anymore. Although when I first became aware of Edgar Payne's
Mm.
book and all those ways you can identify a composition in a landscape, that was a huge door that flung open for me. I thought, my gosh, there's a structure. Thank God somebody knows, you know, and, I don't think like that anymore, though it's probably because it's intuitive at this point. I, at one point, used, a grid kind of armature, like the tic-tac-toe kind of thing every single time I started a painting. And that's all really valuable. But at some point you internalize that and you don't have to think about it consciously anymore. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Kind of, but not really, which is fine. I mean, we all are a little bit different. I was just trying to pull out to see if you are more of a weight painter or you're more of a value painter, or you're obviously not a color because you're more of a tonalist. But I was just trying to think of how
Probably
you think.
values probably over, yeah,
Yeah,
mass.
and do you prefer tension over calm?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, my results in my paintings, people tell me that they're very calming, or there's a peaceful quality to, I mean, I've heard that, so I don't know. But I think I probably enjoy a little bit of tension in them.
Yeah, I'm curious now with your course with Skip, how it's going to evolve your painting. And I wonder if we're going to be able to see a progress or differentiation. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, I've already, painted some pieces using some of his ideas, and which are not all his ideas. They're things I haven't studied before. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be a huge tool in my toolbox.
yeah, well, yeah, definitely right. Now, you briefly talked about a structured thing like Edgar Payne's. Oh, wow, there's structure to composition. But you started off with a law degree, which you can't get much more structured than that.
True.
And,
Maybe math.
true enough, true enough. How, or if at all, does your law degree play into the business side or being more professional artist, if at
I
all?
think it's just, it's part of my nature, is also why I went to law school. I really enjoy studying and research and all that kind of boring stuff. And I'm pretty organized, and all those things are really helpful qualities in art, because it gives you an advantage over, there's a lot of people that don't necessarily focus on those things. I may not have as much creativity as some, but I'm very organized and I'm very thoughtful and studious, and I think just having, taken a course on contracts or two, then I'm not nervous when and I have to read any contract or anything like that. I'm pretty confident, and I think that's the biggest part. It's I can write, I think, and that doesn't have a whole lot to do with art, but sometimes it does. And so, it's been an influence. It's kind of one of the pieces of the puzzle of life that you get to put together and go, oh, okay, that works, even though it doesn't seem so obvious at first.
Yeah, it's kind of paid off through your growth as an individual, right? And so you have an advantage writing probably artist statements and bios over some other people, contracts for sure, business side of it as well, where other people might just struggle with it. I think a lot of artists just don't understand how
Yeah.
much business is involved in being an artist, correct?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, everybody's an entrepreneur, right? Every
Yeah.
artist is a small business owner. And that kind of education, a law degree is it's a business degree in a lot of ways. I mean, just teaches you a lot.
Yeah. So do you think taking the odd business course here and there for an artist might be a good stepping stone for them?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't argue with that. As much
Yeah.
as we don't want to do it.
Right. No, I mean, there's so
Yeah.
much of it that, it's exhausting, but it's necessary evil.
Yeah. Well, speaking of necessary evil, and you tell me if you don't want to answer the question. Pricing. Are you comfortable with your strategy for pricing? And is it the typical square inch adjustable kind of spreadsheet system that a lot of artists use? You don't have to get into details, of course.
Yeah, I don't do it by the square inch. I don't really, I mean, it does go up in size, the price does, but pricing is difficult. It's really hard, even especially at first. And you're kind of just like, I don't, I'd give somebody this for $5. I'd be so excited they'd sell it, they'd buy it from me. But then you quickly realize, no, that's not the right value for your painting. Your time and your hopefully really good work is worth something. And so I think comparing yourself to other people of your, with your experience and, number of years doing this, or your kind of peer group within the art world, and sort of making sure you're in line with them is that's how I've done it. I still think it's hard. I don't know what the right sweet spot is. I've been told you should raise your prices every year by, X%. I don't necessarily always do that either. So I don't know the best formula, but size seems to be, just consistent across the board is important. Obviously, from gallery to gallery or wherever you're selling, be consistent if it's the same type of product. And compare yourself to others doing about the same, in your best judgment, about the same type of work you are.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer.
Thank you.
It's a very hard one to answer without getting into the microeconomics, I guess you could say, right? All the math. Moving back to art, though, here's an interesting question. How does the atmosphere and weather influence your paintings?
Well,
Or I guess I could add to that, do you manufacture atmosphere when there is none?
not when I'm outside. I might choose to do that in the studio once I come in. And, I'm just depending on what mood I'm trying to create in a painting, what my intent is with it. Or I can say I've done it on a whim, just change it up and see what happens. And I think it's the artist's prerogative for sure. But you do have to be careful and make sure your light, reflects all that, and your color's consistent, and you can't just change up the color of the sky and expect the rest of the colors of a plein air piece to make sense, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I had this conversation with an artist the other day about studies and the idea of, do you sell your studies or do you hold on to them? And her opinion was it's more valuable to an artist to hold on to their studies, to use as inspiration, than it is to get your $300-500 for them. What's your take on that?
Right in between.
Oh, interesting.
Some of them, I mean, I have some up there, little ones at the very top that I've had for years and years. Some certain studies I'll never let go of. Others kind of, I realize I've gotten what I want to get out of them, and I'll let them go. I do that maybe every other year. I'll do a little study sale kind of on Instagram, my website. And because I don't need them anymore, and I don't need, 500 little studies in my studio, I need to make room for new stuff. So, but I definitely have some that I will never let go of, because usually it's some that have been seminal in some way. I've learned something that to me was really important and a valuable lesson, or I've changed, I've done something differently than I have ever done before, and I've really loved it, and it will continue to inform me and also affirm me, when I look at it. Okay, good job. So some of them I won't let go of, but some of them I will.
Yeah, but not until it's time.
Not until, yeah. And it may be like 5 years, down the road where, okay, I've used this up. I can go do this again and do it differently, or, got to stay interested.
Yeah, for sure. Or you downsize.
Yes, that can be another, yeah, catalyst.
All right. Now, being a professional artist that has to produce art, I mean, we love going outside and painting because it brings a lot of joy. But then there's also the aspect of the studio where you just got to show up and do it. And how do you get through the days where you show up to your studio with a cup of coffee and you just,
Mhm.
I don't want to work on this. I don't want to work on this. I don't want to work on this, but you have to work on this and this and this. How do you get into the motivation of producing artwork when you're really not into it?
Um, you show up in some way, and maybe that means that you step aside for, an hour and you watch an Artful Minds podcast, for example, or something where, somebody you love, that you watch an interview with them, or you pick up a book and you read a chapter of John Carlson, and, or you go on a walk or whatever it is, but come back and show up. Right. Some of it you've kind of got to put on some really good music and get going.
Yeah. And do you find once you do get going, that's kind of the catalyst and you
Yeah.
keep on progressively making decisions and you end up painting?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, usually, yeah, some days are just you're not as jazzed, or you're maybe not feeling like you're any good that day or
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, some days you need to put the brush down and just go away for the day. It comes back.
Yeah, 100%. Now that's interesting because that was a recent situation where I had to rework a painting and it was causing this huge amount of anxiety. And I just wanted to leave for the day, but I pushed through it. And then, of course, everything evolved and corrected it. But how do you work through all that anxiety, or do you get anxiety working on or reworking paintings?
Yeah, no, I definitely do. A lot of self-doubt, all that good stuff. Are you going to be able to do this? Sometimes I'll take a photo of what I'm working on. I mean, if it's really giving me an issue, I'll take a photo of it, put it on my laptop, pull it into Photoshop, and kind of work on it that way for a little bit.
Interesting.
And just see if I can kind of push through some of the issues I'm having. Most of my work is, I don't do huge pieces that require me to work on it. Like, I think my attention span is just short enough to where I like work that's manageable, that I can handle it in a day or 3 days tops. So if I'm not usually grinding on a piece for a long time. If I am, it's going to the back of the stack and I'm starting something new.
Interesting. All right. So I guess with that, I don't want to say short timeline, it's just your natural timeline of the painting's evolution. You definitely don't start on larger pieces without planning them out first. They're always
Right.
planned or working on studies, correct?
Right. Yeah.
How many studies do you think you put together or sketches to have for this larger piece that you're building up?
I just a couple. I'll
Okay.
have everything I do starts with a plein air study. Even if it doesn't end up looking anything like the plein air study, the genesis of it is that study. And so there's that. And then there's probably a drawing that I kind of work on in the studio. And then I might jump into it, or maybe I'll do a gouache, or maybe I'll do a small oil. There's not much more than the plein air, and then another step in between that and the big painting. I just don't have that much patience for it. I get bogged down if I'm planning it too much. Now, you got to plan it somewhat, because you go into it without a plan, and like Carlson said, nature will pile lumber in your way, if you go into it without an idea what you want to do. And that is always the way to bomb a painting, is to go into it without a real solid idea. But once I guess I feel like I have that pretty quickly. And then if it ends up not working, and I just, I'll start a different one. And it may come back and I may end up painting over, one that I put aside, or I may finish it. I love painting over old work. That's quite fun.
All right, cool. So you got to just keep that inspiration going without flogging a dead horse, I guess, as the expression
Yeah.
says, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll tend to let it go do something else and come back if I have to. But
gotcha. And it was funny, you mentioned gouache, and coincidentally, there's a question on gouache in our questions here. And has painting in gouache influenced your oil paintings?
I think so. I mean, I don't know that it's changed the way I paint them. It might have changed the way I think about them. It's definitely offered me a tool for quick outdoor studies versus, even a 30-minute with my whole planner setup. That's a whole thing. And that's not as easily, transported places or on quick, weekends or something like that, where I just want to gather some information without taking all my oil stuff. It's helped me do that. So, I don't know that it's the brushwork. I find quite fun with gouache. I feel like I can do a lot more of that just interesting brushwork with it. So maybe in that thread, it sort of weaves its way in to my oil paintings. I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of the brushwork with gouache is always different from oil because I just love gouache, but you can't replicate how it works compared to
Yeah,
oil. No.
I haven't been able to.
Yeah. And now again, did the gouache come from inspiration from Scott
Yeah,
Christensen, or did you fall? Okay, you did. Yeah.
yeah. No, yeah, he was the first one using it that I saw. And so I just thought, I need to try this. It's CrossFit.
Which is really good for artist growth, I think, because it introduces you something that isn't what you're doing and
Yeah,
sparks
exercise
inspiration, right?
your brain in different ways. And
Yeah.
yeah, it just totally allows me to paint in times and areas and places that I wouldn't normally get to do it outside. It's been a great addition.
That's interesting, but it wasn't the gouache palette you took to New York. It was your full oil palette.
Yeah, I wasn't using gouache at that point. I've only done gouache for a couple of years.
Oh, okay. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
We kind of talked about this a little bit, but more or less just the studies and then moving into a final piece. But when you're working on the final piece, how do you know it's done?
You cannot add anything or take anything away to improve it.
So you find yourself just hovering around the painting, not doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, it'll just kind of sometimes just be upon me, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's finished. Don't touch it. But I step back a lot while I'm painting.
Mm,
Jill actually was the first one to really drill that into my brain, or that's what just step back from your painting constantly so that you can, assess it. And I guess I'm doing that a lot while I'm painting. And at some point, I don't know, I just know.
yeah, that's interesting. Now, when you say step back, I find that fascinating because I've been painting like that for a few years now, and I find myself less active when I'm painting. I'm doing less, but I'm doing more good for the painting. Does that make sense? Do you find the same thing? Less brushstrokes, more intent?
You're being more thoughtful about it.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Do you find stepping back and observing and
Yeah, it interrupts that need to decorate,
I
that
love that expression.
need to keep going. And oh, I'll put a mark here, and that one was so good. Let me put it up here, and that color looks so great there. I'm going to put it over there and over there and over there. And before you know it, it just interrupts that flow enough. You got to remain somewhat objective, while you're painting. It's great to be in the flow, but at some point it can also get you in trouble.
For sure. Now, do you see, like for me, when I step back, I see the painting as a viewer and not a painter, and it helped
Mhm.
me make decisions on stroke. Would you say that's an accurate observation, or do you disagree with that?
Yeah, I mean, well, you are a painter and you're being, thoughtful in assessing your own piece, but you want to see it from far away. You want it to grab your attention as if you were, viewer. I think, yeah, seeing it from across the room and having it read. So 12 feet back is what Jill would always say. Get across the room from it and see if you can, if it reads and you're not seeing any mistakes, then get back up there and keep going.
That's great advice, and I think,
You'll see mistakes that you don't see when you're just all up in it.
yeah, everyone should listen to this advice for sure.
And hold your brush at the end and
Mm,
use your shoulder and don't get all up in there.
yeah. Plus, you get your steps in, right?
Yeah, that too.
I really like to hear this because it reinforces and it makes things better for me. Rejection. Have you got it? And how do you deal with it?
I have got it. I have gotten it. Yes, I have been rejected. I was rejected so many times before I was accepted to all the shows that you try to get into. I had plenty of rejection, and then once in a while you start getting accepted, and then that's very affirming. The rejection is just a message to just keep at it. Not every art is subjective, no matter how we like to think about it. There's some level of that to it, but it's also probably a sign that you could be doing something differently. I try not to get too spun up in entering any one show, and I try to forget about that I even entered it, and I don't ever write down the date that the acceptance rejections come out, because I just don't even want to know. I want to just not think about it. I don't want to put that much credence in it. I never take it for granted when I get in. It's always a huge affirmation, though, and very much appreciated. But I think you just take it as, just keep going, keep studying, keep showing up, because it'll get there eventually. Good things will happen.
Do you think it's when you start first applying for shows, do you think it's a litmus test for needing to improve your artwork?
I mean, yes, I do think that there's some part of that to it, but it's not necessarily, because there's so many people that enter these things, and it can be a hair's breadth difference between your work and somebody else's, and you just got to keep at it. Just keep going. Enter other things. Enter all kinds of things, or just pick something and set your sights on that. Some group or category of these monthly plein air salon things, or the national shows, or some local stuff or whatever. But once you finally get a little affirmation, I think that always puts wind in people's sails. But rejection is inevitable. Happens to everybody. I mean, every show I get one into, I also got 2 rejected from. So, right?
Yeah, it's all perspective.
And enter 3, 2 are going to get rejected every time.
And that's why I love asking these questions to all these artists around the world, because they've all gotten rejected. I'm going, all right.
I've had way more paintings rejected than accepted. So
yeah, that's usually the ratio, isn't it? That's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you for that. And we've come up to our hour, and I have 2 more questions for you. One of them is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Gosh, okay. So I knew you were going to ask that, because you ask it in every interview, and I've watched yours. So there's so much great advice out there. There's such a range of it. I couldn't come up with one particular one. Part of one of the greatest pieces of advice is I got is something I read, and Robert Henry, The Art Spirit. That is a terrific book, and I'm sure most everybody who's watching this has that book. But I mean, it's got so many nuggets, and one of them was, you can't overestimate the value of starts. And I said that already, but the value of knowing, as a beginning artist, to me, the value of knowing that I wasn't wasting my time if I failed a painting, if it didn't turn out. The idea that I was learning, it just reinforced that to me, and it kept me from being discouraged. And I've seen so many people get so discouraged, when they're not doing the level that they want to do. And none of us are, because knowledge precedes execution, right? But I think that knowing that there is huge value in just beginning a painting and getting into it, you've made so many decisions and you've learned something just by doing that I really took that to heart. And I think it kept me going when maybe others got more discouraged. That's always been kind of how I think about avoiding being discouraged when my paintings are really not up to what I think they could be or should be. So that's what I landed on.
I think that's fantastic advice. I think that's fantastic. I cannot disagree with it 100%. Yeah. Now, I hope this is different, but what's the top piece of advice you would give others? I know they're kind of similar, right? But
yeah. And I think just sticking with it, stay focused, study. I think I tell my students that focused practice is really important. And I got that from my tree studies, and that whole year I learned so much. And you can apply that to any aspect of painting. Is just zero in on something, especially if you're just starting out. Zero in on something and just learn the heck out of it. Push yourself to really study it for, doesn't have to be a year, but 2 or 3 months. But focus your practice, and don't kind of continue to be all over the map. I don't think, you're going to get a lot further, a lot faster if you're focused.
I love that. Thank you very much.
So,
and that does take up our hour. So I want to thank you, Julie. Thank you so much for doing this interview. I've been following you on Instagram for years, so this has been fantastic for me. It's like a mini workshop for myself. And of course, thank you to everybody who attended. And you can find Julie on interwebs at juliedavisstudio.com. but you can also find her on Instagram, which I think you're probably more active on,
Yeah.
Julie Davis Studio.
Yes.
And I put that into chat for
I try to
everybody.
be active on that and keep everybody up to date.
There we go. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Cheers.